A black single mom shelters freezing bikers, but her act of mercy traps her family in a deadly standoff. Protected by an army of outlaws, she becomes the target of a vengeful cartel. Her home is now a battlefield, and her heart is caught in the crossfire. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. The wind howled like a dying animal, a bitter frozen serration against the window pane. Keisha Jones tightened the frayed belt of her worn terry cloth robe, peering out into the swirling Minnesota blizzard. The world was a sheet of white, a monochrome nightmare that had swallowed her street whole. Inside, the old furnace groaned, a losing battle against the encroaching cold. She thought of her children, Maya and Jamal, sleeping fitfully in the back room, buried under every blanket they owned. Her paycheck from the county clinic hadn't stretched to cover this kind of cold, not with the emergency repair the furnace had needed just last week. A sound, deeper and rougher than the wind, cut through the night. Then another and another, not cars, motorcycles, dozens of them. Her breath hitched. Who in God's name was out in this? She saw the dim, snow-blurred shapes of headlights stutter and die at the end of her long, rural driveway. A procession of large, dark figures like a line of wounded bears began trudging through the knee-deep snow toward her modest two-story farmhouse. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This is it, she thought, a cold dread seeping into her bones that had nothing to do with the temperature. They've finally come for the house, or worse. She grabbed the heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove, her knuckles white. The doorbell didn't ring. Instead, a fist clad in black leather pounded against the solid wood, a sound of desperation, not aggression. She unlocked the deadbolt with a trembling hand and opened the door a crack, the frigid air slapping her face. A wall of men stood on her porch, covered in ice and snow, their faces etched with a raw, primal fear that disarmed her immediately. The one in front, a mountain of a man with a salt and pepper beard crusted with ice, took a step back, his hands raised. "Please," he rasped, his voice gravelly from cold and something else. "Terror. Our brother. He's shot. We're losing him. We saw your light." Keisha's nurse instincts kicked in, overriding her fear. She yanked the door open wider. "Bring him in, now, on the couch." The men moved with a startling coordinated efficiency, carrying a massive unconscious form wrapped in a leather cut adorned with the infamous Hell's Angels' death's head. The coppery tang of blood filled her living room, a stark, metallic contrast to the scent of the pine-scented candle she'd lit earlier. She was all business, her voice sharp with command. "You, get me my bag from the hall closet. It's the big red one. You, boil water, clean towels from the linen cupboard now." The bikers, these hardened, terrifying men, jumped to her orders without question. The leader, whose name she learned was Marcus, became her reluctant surgical assistant, his large, calloused hands holding pressure on the wound in the man's abdomen while Keisha worked with a precision born of a decade in the ER. For 2 hours, it was just her training, and the dying man on her couch. She cleaned, she stitched, she administered antibiotics and painkillers from her well-stocked kit. The other 24 men stood or sat in a hushed, respectful silence, a sea of black leather and quiet awe in her small, tidy living room, surrounded by her children's crayon drawings and family photos. They had shed their wet cuts, revealing an array of tattoos that spoke of a life she could only imagine. They looked lost. Finally, Keisha sat back on her heels, wiping a strand of hair from her forehead with a bloody wrist. "He's stable. The bullet went through clean, but he lost a lot of blood. He needs a hospital." Marcus shook his head, his eyes, a startlingly clear blue, locked on hers. "Can't. They'll be watching the hospitals. You're it, Doc. You saved him." "I'm a nurse, not a doc," she corrected softly, her body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. "And who are they?" Before he could answer, a small voice piped up from the hallway. "Mommy, who are all these big men?" Little Maya, clutching her teddy bear, stared wide-eyed at the scene. The sea of giants seemed to collectively soften. One of the younger bikers, a lanky kid they called Jax, gave her a shy smile. "We're just friends of your mom's, sweetheart. We got caught in the snow." And just like that, the siege of Keisha's home began. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving a world of blinding, pristine white. The silence was profound, broken only by the drip of melting snow from the gutters. Keisha was in the kitchen, scrambling a mountain of eggs and frying 3 packs of bacon, her meager groceries being devoured by the unexpected guests. A few of the bikers were playing a quiet game of Go Fish with Maya, and a now curious Jamal at the kitchen table, their massive hands clumsy with the small cards. It was a bizarre, almost comical scene of domesticity. Then the sound started. It wasn't the ragged rumble from the night before. This was a deep, synchronized, earth-shaking thunder. It grew from a hum to a roar, a vibration that made the plates in the cupboard rattle. Keisha froze, the spatula in her hand. Marcus, who had been dozing in a chair by the patient, was instantly on his feet, his face a mask of grim alertness. He moved to the window and looked out. His shoulders, usually set in a defiant line, slumped for a fraction of a second before they squared again, harder than ever. "They're here," he said, his voice low. "Who's here?" Keisha asked, her blood running cold. "The club," he said, a strange mix of dread and pride in his tone. "All of them." She joined him at the window and her knees went weak. As far as she could see, down her driveway along the county road, parked in neat, intimidating rows, were motorcycles. Hundreds upon hundreds of them. And standing beside them, or already moving with a quiet, terrifying purpose, were men and women in leather cuts. The morning sun glinted off chrome and polished skulls. It wasn't an invasion, it was the arrival of an army. Marcus turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Keisha, listen to me. The man on your couch, David, he's our sergeant at arms. The men who shot him are from the Vipers, a cartel-backed crew trying to move in on our routes. They think they've cornered us. They think we're weak. By being here, by saving him, your home is now the front line." Before she could process this, the front door opened without a knock. A man walked in and the room fell silent, the respect palpable. He was older, in his 60s, with a face like a roadmap of a hard life. But his eyes held a fierce, intelligent light. This was Arthur, the chapter president. He ignored everyone else and walked straight up to Keisha. "You're the nurse," he stated, not asked. "I am. And this is my house." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "It is. And we are in your debt. A debt we don't take lightly." He looked around her small living room, at the patient on the couch, at the children at the table. "The Vipers know David is here. They're coming. We are not leaving our brother, and we are not leaving you and your children unprotected. My men are establishing a perimeter. Your home is now a field hospital, and my temporary headquarters. You are under the protection of the Hell's Angels." It wasn't a request. It was a declaration. Keisha felt the walls of her life, her safe, struggling but predictable life, close in around her. She was trapped, protected by the most dangerous men in the state, which made her a target for the second most dangerous. The day unfolded with a surreal, military-like precision. Men came and went, reporting to Arthur and Marcus in hushed tones. Maps were spread across her dining table, pushing aside a bowl of fruit. Radios crackled. Keisha's nursing duties continued. She changed David's dressings, monitored his vitals, all under the watchful, grateful eyes of his brothers. There was a constant low thrum of tension, a waiting. In the afternoon, a gruff biker named Tiny, who was built like a refrigerator, approached her as she was sorting medical supplies. Ma'am, the little girl, she said she was cold. We fixed your furnace." He gestured to the basement door. "Wasn't nothing major, just a faulty igniter." Keisha was speechless. Later, she found another biker, a quiet man named Paul, on his hands and knees fixing a loose floorboard in the hallway that had been tripping Jamal for months. These small, unexpected acts of kindness created a bizarre cognitive dissonance. These were outlaws, criminals, and yet they were fixing her furnace and playing cards with her kids. The first sign of real trouble came at dusk. A single sharp crack echoed in the distance, a gunshot. It was followed by the roaring of engines as a group of angels chased down the source. They returned 20 minutes later, their faces grim. "Scout," Marcus reported to Arthur. "Took care of it." The word "took care of it" hung in the air, heavy and ominous. This was real. People were getting hurt, maybe killed, just beyond the tree line of her property. That night, after she'd put the kids to bed in her room, the only place she felt they were truly safe, she found Marcus on the back porch, staring out into the darkness. The air was crisp and cold, the sky a blanket of brilliant stars. He held a steaming mug of coffee out to her. "Figured you could use this," he said, his voice softer than she'd heard it. "Thank you," she whispered, taking it. Their fingers brushed, and a jolt, warm and entirely inappropriate, shot up her arm. She looked at him, really looked at him. The weariness around his eyes, the strength in his jaw, the surprising gentleness in his hands when he'd helped her with David. "I'm sorry," he said, not looking at her. "For all of this. For bringing this war to your doorstep." "You didn't have a choice," she replied, surprising herself with her empathy. "You were saving your friend." "He's more than a friend. He's family. It's the only one most of us have ever known." He finally turned to her, his gaze intense. "You saved our family, so now you are our family. It's that simple for us." The way he said family felt different. It felt like a vow, a chain and a shelter all at once. He was close, too close. The scent of leather, coffee, and cold night air was an intoxicating mix. She could see the pulse beating at the base of his throat. This was a man who lived by a code of violence and loyalty, a world away from her life of pediatric checkups and PTA meetings. Yet in that moment, the space between them crackled with a charged, undeniable energy. It was the chemistry of two opposing forces colliding. Her compassion and his brutality, her order and his chaos. He leaned in slightly, and for a heart-stopping moment she thought he might kiss her. She didn't know if she would pull away. A radio on his belt crackled to life. "Marcus, we've got movement on the eastern ridge, multiple vehicles." The spell was broken. His eyes hardened, the soldier replacing the man. "On my way," he barked into the radio. He gave her one last lingering look, a look that promised this wasn't over, and then he was gone, melting into the darkness, leaving her alone on the porch with her racing heart and the terrifying knowledge that the man who made her feel so unnervingly alive was also the reason she might not survive the week. The following day, the siege tightened. The Vipers, growing bolder, had set up a roadblock a mile out, stopping all traffic. They were trying to starve them out, isolate them. Morale inside the house, which had been bolstered by the show of force, began to dip. Arguments broke out over strategy. Some of the younger, hotter-headed members wanted a full frontal assault. Keisha, who had been quietly observing the dynamics, finally had enough. She was in the middle of changing David's IV bag when a shouting match erupted between two burly bikers named Diesel and Gears. "We can't just sit here like ducks," Diesel yelled, slamming his fist on the table. "And run into an ambush? You're an idiot." Gears shot back. "Enough!" Keisha's voice cut through the noise, sharp and clear as a scalpel. Every head turned to her. She walked into the center of the room, her nurse's scrubs a stark contrast to the sea of black. "The patient needs quiet. I need quiet. You think this is a clubhouse? Look around. This is a hospital. My children are sleeping upstairs. You will lower your voices and you will act like professionals, or so help me God, I will throw every last one of you out into the snow, vipers or no vipers." A stunned silence filled the room. These men who bowed to no one were being scolded by a 5'6" single mother. And the incredible thing was, they listened. They looked down, chastised. Arthur, who had been watching from the corner, gave a slow, approving nod. In that moment, Keisha established her authority. She wasn't just a victim anymore, she was the general of this makeshift fortress, and her primary concern was the well-being of everyone under her roof. Later, she used that authority to propose a solution to the food shortage. "They're stopping trucks, right? What about a snowmobile? There's an old trail behind the property that leads to the back of Miller's grocery store. I used to take it when my car broke down." It was a simple, brilliant civilian solution that the bikers, with their minds on military tactics, had overlooked. Marcus organized a small, stealthy run, and they returned with enough supplies to last another week. That small victory, engineered by Keisha, bonded them to her in a way nothing else could. She was no longer just their savior, she was their strategist. The tension reached its breaking point on the third night. David's fever spiked, a sign of a possible infection. Keisha was by his side, working frantically, while outside the world erupted into chaos. The Vipers had launched their attack. The night exploded with the sound of gunfire, not single distant shots, but the rapid pop-pop-pop of semi-automatic weapons. Engines roared, men shouted. From the window, Keisha saw the flashes of muzzle fire in the trees. It was a full-scale assault on the perimeter. The house itself shuddered as a bullet buried itself in the siding just beside the window. Maya started screaming upstairs. Jamal was crying. Keisha's blood ran cold. This was it. They were going to die here, in her home. Marcus burst into the living room, his face smudged with dirt, a rifle in his hand. "Keisha, get the kids and get down. Now!" He didn't have to tell her twice. She grabbed a terrified Maya and a sobbing Jamal and shoved them into the small basement, the least exposed part of the house. As she turned to go back for David, Marcus stopped her. "No, stay here." "I can't. He'll die if his fever breaks and he goes into shock," she yelled over the din. Their eyes met in the dim light, a torrent of unspoken words passing between them. Fear, resolve, and something deeper, something that had been growing in the quiet moments between the storms. He saw the nurse, the mother, the warrior in her. He gave a sharp, reluctant nod. "Paul, Jax, on me, we're moving David," he barked. Under a hail of gunfire, they moved the wounded man, couch and all, into the relative safety of the basement. Keisha worked in the flickering light of a hurricane lamp, her hands steady despite the war raging above them. The sounds of the battle were muffled but terrifying. The crunch of metal, the shattering of glass, the guttural yells of men fighting for their lives and for theirs. Marcus stood at the top of the basement stairs, a sentinel, firing back at shadows. Time lost all meaning. It was just Keisha's frantic prayers, the children's whimpers, and the relentless soundtrack of violence. And then, as suddenly as it began, it started to ebb. The gunfire became sporadic, then ceased. The roaring engines faded into the distance. An eerie, ringing silence descended, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the crackle of flames from a burning motorcycle outside. Marcus came down the stairs, his body sagging with exhaustion. He had a cut over his eyebrow and blood trickled down his temple. "It's over," he rasped. "They're gone. We held the line." Keisha looked from his battered face to David, whose fever had finally broken, to her children huddled together but alive. A sob escaped her, a release of all the terror, the stress, the impossible weight of the last few days. She didn't realize she was crying until Marcus was there, his arms around her, pulling her into the solid, unyielding wall of his chest. He smelled of gunpowder, sweat, and blood, but in that moment he was the safest thing she had ever known. She buried her face in his leather vest and wept. He held her, one hand cradling the back of her head, his lips pressed against her hair. "Shh," he murmured, his voice a rough vibration against her. "It's over, you're safe. You were incredible." When she finally pulled back, her tears had left dark stains on his cut. He wiped a thumb gently across her cheek, his touch surprisingly tender. The charged chemistry from the porch was back, but now it was laced with the raw emotional aftermath of survival. It was deeper, more profound. It was the look between two people who have stared into the abyss together and come out the other side. The next morning, the true cost was tallied. Several angels were wounded, but thanks to Keisha's triage station, none critically. The Vipers, however, had been decimated. The show of force from the entire club had been a message that was received loud and clear. Their territory was secure. A week later, David was strong enough to travel. The bikes that had filled the fields for days began to rumble to life, one by one, and depart. The army was leaving. Arthur approached Keisha as she stood on her porch watching them go. He pressed a thick envelope into her hand. She tried to give it back. "I can't." "It's not for saving him," Arthur said, his eyes knowing. "It's for the furnace, the floorboard, the food, and for the bullet holes in your siding. We take care of our debts." He paused, looking at the now quiet field. "And you, Keisha Jones, will always be under our protection. If you ever need anything at all, you call." He handed her a simple business card with only a phone number on it. Finally, it was just Marcus left. His bike was packed. The silence between them was heavy with everything that had happened and everything that couldn't. "You could stay," she found herself saying, the words leaving her mouth before she could stop them. "For coffee." He looked at her and the longing in his eyes mirrored her own, but he shook his head slowly, a sad smile on his face. "My world. It's no place for you. Or for them." He nodded toward the house where Maya and Jamal were waving goodbye from the window. "You gave us back our brother. You gave us a chance. I can't drag you into the darkness to show my gratitude." He took a step closer, cupping her face in his hands. This time, he did kiss her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a claiming, a farewell, a promise, and an apology all at once. It was filled with the taste of coffee, leather, and a future that could never be. When he pulled away, her lips tingled and her heart ached. "Goodbye, Keisha," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He swung a leg over his bike, kicked it to life with a roar that shattered the morning peace, and rode away without looking back. Keisha stood on the porch until the sound of his engine faded into the whisper of the wind, the envelope of cash feeling heavy in her hand, the memory of his kiss burning on her lips. Her life had been torn apart and put back together, but the shape was forever changed. She had saved a life, commanded an army of outlaws, and found a love as dangerous as it was beautiful. And as she turned to go back inside, to her children and her repaired but forever scarred home, she knew one thing for certain. The quiet struggle of her old life was over. She was a different woman now, stronger, fiercer, and forever bound by loyalty to a family that lived in the shadows. The silence was the first thing she noticed. It was no longer the tense, waiting quiet of the siege, but a profound, almost deafening absence of sound. No rumble of idling engines, no crackle of radios, no low murmur of rough voices. Just the wind sighing through the pines and the distant call of a crow. Keisha stood on her porch for a long time, the worn wood cool beneath her bare feet, the thick envelope from Arthur feeling like a lead weight in her hand. The ghost of Marcus's kiss still burned on her lips, a brand of what was and what could never be. She turned and went inside, the door clicking shut behind her with a finality that echoed in her soul. The house was clean, immaculately so. While she'd been saying her quiet, heart-wrenching goodbye to Marcus, his men had been busy. The floors were swept, the dishes from breakfast were washed and put away. The maps and radio equipment were gone. They had even, she noticed with a lump in her throat, stacked the leftover canned goods and non-perishables neatly in a pyramid on the kitchen counter. It was a soldier's farewell, efficient and respectful. "Mommy?" Maya's small voice came from the living room. "Are the big men all gone?" Keisha walked in to find her children sitting on the couch, the very couch where a man had nearly died. They looked small and lost. Jamal was tracing the faint, lingering stain on the fabric with his finger. "They're gone, baby," Keisha said, her voice softer than she intended. "Is the bad man coming back?" Jamal asked, not looking up. Keisha knelt before them, taking their hands in hers. "No, honey, the bad men are gone. The big men made sure of that." How did you explain a turf war to a 6-year-old? How did you explain that their protectors were also monsters to someone else? The first day of the after was surreal. Every creak of the old house made her jump. Every car that passed too slowly on the county road sent a jolt of adrenaline through her system. She was jumping at shadows, her nerves stretched taut. She kept expecting to see Marcus's broad silhouette in the doorway, to hear his gravelly voice. The emptiness he left behind was a physical ache. It was Maya who broke the tension in the way only a child can. She was reading a picture book to a row of her stuffed animals using a deep, rumbling voice. "And then Mr. Bear said, 'You gotta be quiet, the patient is sleeping,'" she growled, mimicking Marcus perfectly. Keisha couldn't help but laugh, a real, genuine laugh that felt like it cracked a layer of ice around her heart. Later, she opened Arthur's envelope. It was filled with $100 bills, more money than she had ever held in her life. Enough to pay off the rest of the mortgage, to put a real down payment on a new car, to send the kids to summer camp. It was freedom, delivered in cash by outlaws. The moral ambiguity of it made her head spin. This was blood money in a way. But it was also a token of gratitude, a life raft thrown to her by the very people who had almost drowned her. A week passed. Life, stubborn as always, began to reassert its mundane rhythms. She went back to work at the clinic, where her absence had been explained by a sudden family emergency. The questions in her colleagues' eyes were met with a new steely wall in her own. She had faced down a cartel-backed motorcycle gang. Concerned small-town gossip held no power over her anymore. But the world outside her bubble had noticed the attack hadn't gone completely unreported. A small piece in the local paper mentioned a disturbance and reports of gunfire out on the old county road, blaming it on trespassers and possible drug activity. It was a bland, sanitized version of the war that had raged on her doorstep. It made her feel like she was living in two parallel realities. It was on a Tuesday while she was sorting laundry that she found it. A single black leather glove tucked behind the washing machine. It was worn and soft, and it smelled distinctly of him. Motorcycle oil, faint cigar smoke, and that essential masculine scent that was purely Marcus. She brought it to her face, closing her eyes, and for a moment, the memory of his arms around her was so vivid it stole her breath. She didn't throw it away. She hid it in her underwear drawer, a secret, shameful treasure. The dreams started then. Not nightmares of gunfire, but restless, heated dreams of him. Of his hands, surprisingly gentle on her skin. Of the look in his blue eyes, not as a soldier, but as a man. She'd wake up flushed and aching, the emptiness of her bed more pronounced than ever. One afternoon, a sleek black SUV, a complete anomaly on her dirt road, pulled into her driveway. Her heart leaped into her throat, a confusing mix of fear and wild, impossible hope. But the man who got out wasn't Marcus. It was Jax, the young lanky biker who had played Go Fish with Maya. He looked different in clean jeans and a plain t-shirt, The club cut absent. "Keisha," he said, nodding respectfully. "Just making the rounds. Arthur wanted to be sure you were good." "I'm managing," she said, her voice a little unsteady. "How is David?" A genuine smile broke out on Jax's face. "He's tough. Out of rehab and driving everyone crazy already. He talks about you, you know. Calls you his guardian angel in scrubs." He handed her a simple disposable phone. "Prepaid. Our number is the only one in it. If you need anything. Anything, you call." He didn't stay long, but his visit was a tether, a confirmation that the other world, Marcus's world, still existed just out of sight. It was both comforting and deeply unsettling. 2 more weeks drifted by. The sharp edges of the memory began to soften, blurring into the past. She used some of the money to finally fix the leaky roof. She bought the kids new winter coats. The normalcy was slowly stitching itself back together. Then one evening she saw it. A motorcycle, a single familiar Harley parked under the old oak tree at the edge of her property. He was just sitting there, a dark silhouette against the setting sun, not approaching the house. Just watching. Her breath caught. She stood at the window, frozen, her hand pressed to her chest. He stayed for maybe 10 minutes, a still, silent sentinel. Then the engine growled to life and he rode away. He hadn't come to talk. He had just come to see, to know she was safe. The gesture was so profoundly him, protective, possessive, and yet respectful of the boundary he himself had drawn. It shattered the fragile peace she'd built. The carefully suppressed emotions came flooding back, a riptide pulling her under. That night, alone in her room, she took the prepaid phone Jax had given her. Her fingers trembled as she typed a single message, not to the club's number. She had memorized the digits he'd once scrawled on a piece of paper when coordinating patrols, a number she had no business having. "The faucet in the guest bathroom is leaking." It was a stupid, mundane message, a code for something she couldn't bring herself to say. "I see you. I remember. I'm not okay." She didn't expect a reply. She put the phone away, her face burning with a mixture of shame and daring. The next day was Saturday. She was in the backyard, hanging laundry on the line, the simple, mindless task a comfort. The kids were inside watching cartoons. The sun was warm on her back. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of real peace. And then he was there. She didn't hear him approach. She simply turned, a damp t-shirt in her hand, and he was standing at the corner of the house, leaning against the siding as if he'd always been there. He was wearing a simple black Henleyan jeans, his cut absent. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear and fixed intently on her. "Hey," he said, his voice rough, scraping over her nerves like flint. "Hey," she breathed, the word barely a whisper. He pushed off the wall and walked toward her, his movements fluid and predatory. He didn't stop until he was right in front of her, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his body, to smell that familiar, intoxicating scent. "The faucet," he said, his gaze dropping to her mouth for a heart-stopping second before returning to her eyes. It's in the guest bathroom," she managed, her heart hammering against her ribs. A slow, devastating smile touched his lips. "I'm not here for the faucet, Keisha." The air between them crackled, thick with everything unsaid. All the fear, the longing, the shared trauma, the charged moments on the porch and in the basement. It all coalesced into this single suspended moment. He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek, the touch sending a jolt of pure lightning through her. "I tried to stay away," he murmured, his voice low and raw. "I told myself it was the right thing, the only thing." His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "But I can't get you out of my head." "Marcus." His name was a plea on her lips, but for what, she didn't know. For him to stay? For him to go? For him to erase the line between their worlds forever? He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers, his eyes closed. It was in gesture of such profound vulnerability from this hardened man that it broke her completely. This life, it's ugly, Keisha. It's violence and paranoia. It's not for you. You brought that life to my doorstep, she whispered, her hands coming up to rest tentatively on his chest. She could feel the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. And then you became the wall that kept it out. I don't know what's for me anymore. He opened his eyes, and the look in them was full of a desperate, hungry hope. Give me a chance, he rasped. Not the club, not the patch, just me. A cup of coffee, a conversation. It was a reckless, dangerous proposition. Letting this man into her life, even a sliver of it, was like inviting a wolf into the henhouse. He was chaos. He was trouble. But he was also the man who had fixed her furnace and held her while she cried. He was strength and loyalty and a fierce, protective love that she, a woman who had done everything alone for so long, found utterly irresistible. She looked up at him, at the storm in his blue eyes, and made a choice. Not a safe choice, not a smart one, but a choice for herself, for the woman who had emerged from the siege, stronger, braver, and unwilling to settle for a life of quiet desperation. The coffee's inside, she said softly, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt, and it's fresh. A look of sheer, unadulterated relief washed over his face. He didn't kiss her, not then. He just nodded, his hand finding hers, lacing their fingers together. It was a connection, a bridge built across an impossible divide. As she led him toward the house, toward the unknown future that stretched out before them, Keisha knew one thing for certain. Her life would never be simple again. But as his large, warm hand held hers, she thought that maybe, just maybe, it didn't have to be. The screen door creaked shut behind them, a sound that seemed to seal a pact. The inside of the house was quiet, filled with the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant chatter of the cartoon from the living room. The space felt different with him in it, not invaded but occupied, charged with a new and potent energy. He stood in the middle of her kitchen, looking large and out of place, yet his presence was no longer that of an intruder. He was a guest, her guest. Keisha moved to the coffee pot on the counter, her hands trembling only slightly as she poured 2 mugs. She was intensely aware of his gaze on her back, a physical weight, warm and unsettling. Cream? Sugar? She asked, her voice a little too high. Black is fine, he said. His voice was quiet, meant just for the confines of this room. She turned, handing him the mug. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and the simple contact sent another one of those electric jolts up her arm. He didn't move away. He held the mug, his eyes locked on hers, and took a slow sip, never breaking contact. It's good, he said, though she was sure he couldn't taste it. It was just something to say, a placeholder for the torrent of words waiting behind his lips. Marcus, she began, but he shook his head, a gentle pleading motion. Let me talk, Keisha, please. I've been rehearsing this in my head for 300 miles. He set the mug down on the counter with a soft click. The sound was final. He ran a hand over his jaw, the stubble making a rasping sound. I've done a lot of things in my life I'm not proud of, he started, his voice low and gravelly. I've broken bones, I've broken laws, I've lived by a code that most people would find savage. The club, my brothers, they're my family, they're all I've ever known. It's a life that doesn't allow for softness, it doesn't allow for this. He gestured between the two of them, his expression pained. What I feel when I look at you, it's a weakness in my world, a fatal one. Keisha's heart clenched. This was it. This was the goodbye she'd been waiting for. the one she knew was inevitable. But he took a step closer. For 45 years, I never questioned it. Weakness gets you killed. It gets your brothers killed. Then I met you, a woman who stood up to a room full of armed men to protect her children and a patient. A woman who looked at a room full of the most feared outlaws in the state and scolded them like they were misbehaving schoolboys. And they listened. I listened. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face before he gently cupped her cheek. His touch was searing. You are the strongest person I have ever met, Keisha. And what I feel for you, God help me, it doesn't feel like a weakness. It feels like the only damn thing that's ever been right. A tear escaped and traced a hot path down her cheek. He caught it with his thumb, his own eyes shimmering with a vulnerability she knew he showed no one else. I can't give you a normal life, he whispered, his voice cracking. I can't show up for PTA meetings and backyard barbecues. My name carries a weight that would crush you and those beautiful kids in there. But I can love you. I can protect you with my last breath. I can be the man who fixes your furnace and your floorboards and who makes sure you never ever have to be afraid again. I can give you loyalty that would shame the sun for rising. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers once more, his eyes squeezed shut as if in prayer. So I'm asking you for the impossible. I'm asking you to let me love you in the shadows, to let me be yours in the quiet moments. I'll be a secret you keep, a ghost that watches over you. It's not fair, it's not enough, but it's all I have to give. Keisha's breath hitched. This wasn't a proposal of a shared life. It was a confession of a divided one. A life where he would exist on the periphery, a guardian angel with a criminal record and a heart that belonged only to her. It was messy. It was dangerous. It was heartbreaking. And it was the most beautiful, honest thing anyone had ever said to her. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart, a rhythm that was already becoming as familiar to her as her own. She thought of the long, lonely years stretching ahead, of the safe, predictable, and utterly empty life she had been living before the storm. She thought of the fierce, unexpected joy that had bloomed in the midst of terror, all because of this man. She looked up, her vision blurred with tears, and saw the fear in his eyes, the fear of her rejection, the fear of this one, beautiful, fragile thing being shattered. No, she whispered. His face fell, a mask of utter devastation crashing down. He started to pull away, but she tightened her grip on his shirt. No, you don't get to be a ghost, Marcus, she said, her voice gaining strength. You don't get to love me from the shadows. She took a deep, shuddering breath. My life hasn't been normal since the day you pounded on my door. And I don't want it to be. I don't want a safe, simple love. I want this. I want the man who plays go fish with my daughter and stares down a cartel for his brother. I want the chaos and the loyalty and the ferocity. She stood on her toes, bringing her face inches from his. So you're not a secret. You're my choice. A complicated, dangerous, impossible choice. And you're mine. The sound that escaped him was half sob, half laugh. A raw release of pure, unadulterated emotion. He looked at her as if she had just hung the moon and stars for him alone. Keisha. Her name was a reverent prayer on his lips. And then he kissed her. It was nothing like the desperate farewell kiss on the porch. This was a beginning. It was slow and deep and soul-searing. A kiss that held all his promises and all her acceptance. It was a conversation without words, a merging of two broken, resilient souls who had found their missing piece in the most unlikely of places. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her flush against him, and she melted into his strength, her hands tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. The world, with all its dangers and complications, fell away. There was only this, only him. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless, forever altered. He rested his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged. "I love you," he murmured, the words sounding foreign and wondrous on his tongue. "I think I loved you from the moment you opened that door and told me to boil water." She laughed, a watery, joyful sound. "I love you too, you impossible man." From the living room, they heard Maya's voice. "Mommy? Who are you talking to?" Keisha looked at Marcus, a new fierce protectiveness in her eyes. She took his hand, lacing her fingers firmly with his. "Come on," she said softly. "It's time to stop hiding in the kitchen." She led him into the living room. Maya and Jamal looked up from the television. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Jamal smiled. "Hi, Marcus." Maya scrambled off the couch and ran over, wrapping her arms around his leg. "You came back." Marcus looked down at the little girl, his expression one of such profound, overwhelmed tenderness that it stole Keisha's breath all over again. He gently extricated his hand from Keisha's and knelt down, bringing himself to Maya's level. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I came back." He looked over at Jamal, including him in his gaze. "If it's okay with you guys." Jamal nodded seriously. "It's okay. You fix stuff." It was the simplest, purest endorsement. Marcus looked back at Keisha, his eyes saying everything his words could not. This was his family now. This messy, complicated, beautiful family. He would love them in the light and protect them from the dark. It wouldn't be easy. There would be phone calls in the night and absences he couldn't explain, and a world that would never understand. But as he stood up, taking Keisha's hand again with Maya still clinging to his leg, he knew he had finally found something worth more than any territory, any empire, any code. He was home. Thank you for watching. Would you have made the same choice as Keisha, risking everything for a dangerous love? Let us know your answer and comment where you're watching from. Subscribe for more stories where impossible choices lead to unforgettable consequences.